We have all faced bullies. I mean, let's face it, in our lives, we have dealt with them our entire life, either in the schoolyard or in the playground, or high school, college, and it doesn't stop after school. It's in your professional life, and it just never seems to end. Well, bullies are cowards. We all know this. They run in packs. They try to sabotage you from behind the scenes. They'll never come up front. And bullies thrive on fear, intimidation, and threats. And that's their mantra. But what happens? What happens when the victim takes action? What happens? Now, I hope no one faces the extreme degree that my next guest faced, but we're going to get into, but before we get into that story, because this is incredible, folks, but before we get into this story, let me tell you a little bit about Mark Simon. Okay, let me get the screen working here. All right. Mark has worked in the entertainment industry for 30 years, and he's been a professional artist for over 40 years. Now, he's an author of numerous entertainment and art texts, as well as his book, his business success book, which is Start at the Top. He now owns Storyboards and Animatics, Inc., which is based in Atlanta, Georgia. And the company provides storyboards and illustrations and cartoons and comic book illustrations in the entertainment industry. This man is the best of the best in what he does. He's won over 200 international awards for projects he's written and directed. And not only that, he's a second-degree black belt, and he is a two-time champion in Taekwondo. Now, Mark's currently doing storyboards on Stranger Things, Black Lightning, and The Walking Dead. Now, how much more impressive can you get than that? Now, he was inducted into the Digital Animation and Visual Effects School Hall of Fame in 2013. Now, the reason we're here with Mark, with all that success, is he was severely bullied throughout high school, and that is the subject of his memoir, Attacked, and that's the book you see over his shoulder. Mark, welcome to Life Altering Events.
Yeah, Frank, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Absolutely. My pleasure. Your book, Attacked, outlined this nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare that you and your family endured.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? What occurred?
Well, there was a gang at my school. I was raised mostly in Houston. I mean, we moved a lot when I was a kid, but mostly in Northwest Houston, an area called Champions. And my family was pretty well to do. You know, I never had want for anything in my entire life. But there was this gang that was run by two guys, Steve and Perry. It wasn't a gang like the Bloods or Crips or anything like that. I mean, this is just two jerks who like to run things, and they weren't very smart, and a bunch of guys liked getting into fights and followed these two idiots around. Now, my youth was not a little bit, it was a lot different than most people. So, and that led into why a lot of this happened. So let me just back up and give you just a brief history. So my father had been an engineer at Shell and then decided to start building custom homes. So I grew up most of my formative years helping him build homes. Mm-hmm. And I took over as superintendent of this big custom home building company when I was 14.
Wow.
Yeah, they gave me a car, and Dad just said, "Don't drive like a moron, and you're not going to get pulled over." So, you know, I was driving illegally for a year, so I could go out, and I would actually, on my way to junior high, I would drive out to the job sites, start all the crews, drive to school, park in the teacher's lot because that's the only lot there was, then drive back in the afternoon to check up, go over the list, and close down the job sites and drive home for lunch or for dinner. Now that's 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. I was doing this. And, you know, all the guys in that worked for us were very large construction men. And here I am, 14. I was tiny. I was 5'3", 5'4" at the time. Very slight, but very, very muscular. But, you know, with what we were wearing then, you couldn't really tell. And I was muscular because I worked construction my entire life, you know, lifting, hauling, And I got to be very, very strong, but I was very, very small. But from telling all these big construction guys what to do, it was very hard to intimidate me. You know, my history of being a kid is, I don't care how big you are. I don't care how old you are. I need you to do this. Stop screwing around and get it done. So that history bring into high school, and you've got these bullies that body check people and knock people out. I mean, there were fights in the locker room all the time, you know, and even playing basketball, they were body checking and to just try to ruin everything. And I was the one guy, even though I was smaller than all these bullies, wouldn't take their stuff at all. I don't know if you're okay with cursing or not.
Nope, I'm fine. This is not a PG thing.
All right. So I wouldn't take their shit at all, which embarrassed them.
Right.
So when a bully gets embarrassed, they want retribution, even though they're the ones who started it. So there's no way out of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they would try to body check me and would bounce off me, even though I was smaller because of construction. They would try to bully and intimidate me in school. What's a high schooler going to do to intimidate me when I'm telling 350-pound guys in their mid-30s what to do every day, right? So I was in a different mindset and a different physicality than almost anyone else in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, I was the only one that embarrassed them. So it built. When 2 of them couldn't do something, 4 of them came after me. Right. Then 8 of them came after me. And I had got the upper hand as far as I would never physically fight them.
Right.
But I wouldn't let them get away with anything either. So I was the standout. And this is a very large school. This is 4,000 students. It was the largest school in Texas. Just high school, just 4 grades, but it was really, really large. And there were a couple incidents that led up to the big attack. The one in particular, the one that led up to it was we had on Saturday nights, there was this big undeveloped subdivision where we would have this big bonfire.
Right.
A couple high schools would get together. Everyone would line the streets. It was hidden by the woods, so cops wouldn't see where we were. We'd build a bonfire. Everyone party, drink, get high, whatever. Right. A lot of hooking up out there. And so I was standing out there with a couple friends, and this one of the 2 ringleaders of this gang, his name is Perry, was just walking around being an ass, and he was looking for something, and as he walked by me, I just said, "No one cares, Perry." And he stopped and turned around. "What'd you say, Simon?" I said, "No one cares, Perry." And he hauled off and he punched me right in the face. And I just stood there and I looked at him. I said, "Perry, you're still not worth it." And I wouldn't fight him. His eyes got really big, and a bunch of his friends came up and grabbed him and pulled him off because, you know, here he is, he's smacking me, and I don't move at all. I mean, I've been hit in the head by lumber. You know, a fist wasn't going to do a whole lot. So that really embarrassed him. So the next weekend, we're all out there again. And I'm sitting in, I had a classic car that I had rebuilt. It was a 63 T-Bird, electric windows. It was my dad's new. And he said, "Look, I'll buy you a new car, or you can have this and I'll pay for whatever you want to do to refurbish it." So I wanted to learn, you know, this is 80s. It was 1980 when this all happened. You know, we were into our cars.
That's right.
So this thing, you know, I had it jacked up in the back, and I had special tires put on it and special air shocks, which, thank goodness, because of what I had to do in this car to get away from these guys. So I'm sitting in the car with a buddy of mine, facing away from the bonfire, talking to a couple people, some girls leaning in the windows, and I hear over the roar of the fire, "Hey, there's Simon, let's rumble." Next thing I know, none of my friends are around the car anymore. And my car is surrounded by, I don't know how many kids, punching us through the windows, climbing on top, trying to bash in the windows with sticks and bats and things. And I yelled at my buddy, "Roll up the windows." So luckily the electric switches were on the middle console. So we were able to lean away from the windows, and my buddy rolled up his window. Perry was punching me through the driver's side window. I grabbed his arm and rolled up the window on it and held on. I put the car in gear and I took off. Right as one of the guys was about to smash in my windshield, I punched it. He went flying off the car, and I drugged Perry down the road. One of his friends, I think his name was David, made the mistake of jumping in front of my car to try to get me to stop. And there was no way I was stopping. I was scared for my life at this point. So I ran over him. He bounced up off over the hood of my car, bounced off the windshield, hit Perry, and they went rolling off into one of the cars. And I'm driving like a bat out of hell through a very narrow area because both sides of this little road are people partying and parking their cars. Most people there don't know what had happened near the bonfire. They think I'm the idiot, not realizing I'm literally running for my life. And there's one exit out of this area, and I missed it. I was so scared I missed it. I spun the car around. We came to a stop, and they took two vehicles and they blocked the exit. And then about 30 guys grabbed pipes and chains out of their pickup trucks, flaming boards out of the fire, and start coming up the road towards my buddy and I. So I literally felt like Frankenstein's monster. Here I'm seeing the silhouette of this gang coming towards me with torches, basically, weapons. Flaming boards. Yes. Yeah. And my buddy looks at me and just starts screaming. And I said, well, hold on. And I punched it and jumped up over the curb. And we couldn't get to the exit road because there was a brick wall there. And in Houston, like a lot of cities, there's ditches on both sides of roads for runoff.
Right. Exactly.
Luckily, they had just dug that out where around the subdivision. And so there was lumps of dirt on either side. And I hit that lump full force with my car, this 4,500-pound 63 T-Bird, and it launched my car over the ditch. And I landed in the middle of the road, swerving between cars. Everyone's driving off, trying not to hit me. And we were able to get away from them. I drove around. I drove to local McDonald's where a deputy that we were all friends with, Officer Ogden, and I was trying to tell him what happened. He goes, look, some of the guys are already here. I don't know what you did. Just go home. Get away from here. Just go home. I dropped my buddy off. I go inside the house, and I start telling my parents what had happened. Before I can get anything done, we hear a bunch of noise out front, and we lived on a corner. So my mom goes out the side, and my mom's 5'3", 90 pounds, tiny woman. She goes out the side to see what's going on. My dad is still in his robe and barefoot. Didn't have his eyes in, as he said. He was wearing his glasses. And I see that it's four of the guys, the two ringleaders and two other guys, and they surround Mom. So I said, Dad, they're getting Mom. He goes, who, what? He doesn't know what's going on. He goes out the side and sees these four guys surrounding my mother and starts running after them. They yell, here comes the old man, let's split. They jump in the pickup and start to drive off. My dad chases down the truck barefoot, grabs one of the guys under the meat of his arm with one arm and picks him up out of the truck, sets him down in the road right in front of our house. Pickup comes back. The other three get out. My dad is holding one guy, Steve, in the street. Steve is spitting on him, hitting him, punching him, cursing at him like my dad said he had never heard anyone come up with. He said he was actually impressed with his litany of curses. But was trying to figure out what was going on. This is
exactly.
And then two of the guys surround my mom, start slapping her around. And one of the other guys throws me up against a tree and starts hitting me. I'm losing it. I can't think straight. I'm not fighting back because I look over, my parents are being assaulted. I'm getting hit. I'm not even thinking about the guy that's with me. I'm just freaking out. A neighbor comes out swinging a pipe saying they just called the cops. the guys leave, cops show up, of course, 2 or 3 minutes later. And that began my nightmare. I was a junior in high school at the time. The next day we called Officer Ogden. He came over to the house. We explained what was going on. Of course, he knew all the kids involved.
Right.
And he was explaining to us that we probably need to get security. That day we started getting death threats, phone calls, notes, letters. My mom would have notes on her car. We're going to kill your son, send him home bloody in a bag. We're going to get you. We're going to get your husband. You know, it was ongoing. We got phone calls. Our house was going to be firebombed. So we hired a private detective who staked out our house. The sheriff's office knew what was going on. They would send patrol cars at times past the house. And Officer Ogden told us, he said, look, unfortunately, because everyone's a minor, there's only so much we can do, but there's a new law on the books that's never been used before. And that's holding parents responsible for the actions of their juveniles. And all right, tell us about it. So we went in to meet with the local judge. His name is Judge McElroy. And McElroy was great. He met us, I think, on a weekend. It was after hours, whenever it was. And he explained the way this would work. In order to hold parents responsible, we have to let them know what's going on to give them the opportunity to control their kids. Okay, that makes sense. So that next Saturday, we brought in the families of all 4 of the kids that attacked my family. We brought them into court so they could be formally warned in court that if the kids attacked me again or anyone in my family, the parents would be taken to jail. 2 of the families dealt with their kids instantly, and I never had a problem with them again. But the 2 ringleaders only had mothers, and their mothers were pieces of work. One of the mothers called me a pussy in court in front of the judge. Said, he's just a pussy. Let the boys work this out on their own. Why am I here? Right?
Yeah.
So we figured, okay, well, this isn't going to get any better. And the judge told him, you are liable if your kids attack Mark again. So then we had a private meeting with the judge afterwards, and he said, look, when you call us, if they attack you again, we will send a patrol car out and pick up the parents of the responsible kids. But make sure they're not just looking at you crosswise. Make sure that it's something that will stand up, that you can win a trial. He said, and this is the tricky thing, I don't want you to get hurt. But it can't be just for them shooting spitballs either.
Yeah, exactly. You have to physically be injured with
or
physical bruises.
under serious threat of being injured. Right.
Oh my God.
So we start talking to the school, because the guys, people were, waiting for me after school. The principal of my school was a great guy. And he got involved, told all my teachers about what was going on. So some teachers would stand outside the class and watch for me. And they gave me a special parking place in the teacher's lot so I could exit out of a different door than everyone else, so I could stay away. My dad gave me one of the work vehicles, so I didn't even drive my car because everyone knew my car. It was a very, very distinctive 63 T-Bird that I totally customized. So I drove a different vehicle so they wouldn't know where I was. And I became a pariah at high school. No one wanted to be near me. I would literally walk down the aisle, 4,000 kids, and they would spread out around me. No one would look me in the eye. No one would say hi. No one would hang out. I couldn't get dates anymore. Everyone was afraid of retribution. If they were associated with me, they'd be attacked, because the buddy of mine who was with me in the car had bricks thrown through his windshield. He was assaulted, so worst case scenario for a teenager is literally no one likes you. It's not just thinking they don't. No one would be near me.
Right.
And even if they did, their parents
We're
wouldn't
terrified.
allow them to hang out.
Exactly.
Because everyone knew what was going on. Even though, there was no such thing as social media, but, phones worked really well back then.
Yeah, they did.
So then went a few months of things that I wasn't certain if it would be good enough. The principal said, look, we can move you to another school. I was a straight A student. So, they said anyone would love to have you. And why should I uproot my life? I didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
They win if I move. So I said, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to stand up against them. So, I had a lot of support. My parents supported me. Like I said, the teachers and principals supported me. The local sheriff, everyone was there, but it was up to me to both protect myself at a moment and know when they had crossed the line.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few times that they had attacked me. I probably should have called, but wasn't certain. There's always that confusion when you're in that. And then there was this one guy I'd met in one of my art classes who had agreed to go out with me because she didn't know what was going on. But she lived near one of the guys, Steve. And I was over at her house. We were throwing Frisbee out front. And a bunch of guys, Steve and a bunch of guys drove by and saw me. 15 minutes later, I look over my shoulder. 8 of them come around the corner armed. They've got bats and chains and pipes and things. And they're coming after me. And I hopped in my car. And right as I started, I see him running up. And I'm looking in my rearview mirror. And this is one of those memories that I'll never forget. As I was pulling down into drive, I stopped in reverse. And I thought, I can end this right now.
Wow.
And then I continued to drive. And then I pulled out straight instead of running over him. But, it's pretty horrible when in your mind, it's like, I could justify doing this.
Right. You're 17 or 18 years old.
I was 16.
God, 16
I was 16
years old.
at this time. Yeah. And when I drove away, I didn't go home. I was afraid they would follow me again. And I had a nervous breakdown. I just drove around Houston. I don't know where I went, but I was gone for hours. I cried. I punched the ceiling of my car. I was screaming. I lost my mind. So after it got dark, I drove home. I called my parents at one point and said, look, I'm coming home. I just don't know where I am. A buddy of mine, the only person, he was a bit older than me, Jim. I'd also called him. I said, I need help. And so he was there. And that night we fortified the house. Jim brought a couple guns over. My parents had guns. We had gotten ourselves armed. We got training in them. And we had guns behind doors. We had weapons behind every exterior door to the house in case anyone came through. I mean, it was a terrible way to live. We spent the night. I'd lost my mind that night. But the rest of the family and my buddy patrolled the house. I mean, it's like, all right, these hours you're here, these hours you're here. I mean, they had worked out literally patrolling the house to stay safe. That night I said, call the sheriff. I said, I'm done. And the 2 ringleaders, their mothers were arrested and thrown in jail that night. I guess it was about a month and a half later, we ended up going to court. This was the first time this law had ever been used. It was completely unproven in the country. No one had ever done it before.
Right.
And we won the trial. We only had to do it with the first mother. The second one pled no contest when she saw how quickly we won. And I don't know what happened to them afterwards. I was 16. There was no social media. But we won and I got my life back.
Tell us about the trial. What was that like, walking into the courtroom and seeing these people?
The worst part of it was before we walked in, before the doors opened, we were standing in the lobby and they walked in. And it got to the point where I was fearful whenever I would see these guys. And it was just a horrible sensation. And then I remember when we walked in, my family and I walked over to the right. We sat up in the front. They walked over onto the left, and they're sneering at me the whole time and laughing and joking. The mothers were pissed. Um, we had the DA was handling our side of it, and the DA didn't show up. An assistant DA did, who knew nothing about what was going on. I was like, oh crap. So we were afraid of what was going to happen. He didn't call anyone on our side, and I looked over at Officer Ogden. He showed up, and I said, Ogden, we need someone here. I said, what about my principal and vice principal? Ogden said, I'm on it. So he went and got the principal and vice principal in, and we told the assistant DA, you're going to call these guys up because they know what's going on with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So the first mother, Steve's mom, she's up there. We find out that she's actually dating her attorney. I think she was trading favors with him. I mean that's even what we were told.
Oh my God.
So she's up there being all smarmy, and her attorney was terrible. He actually lost it. Well, I guess no, she was the last one. He brought up the vice principal, my principal first, and said, do you know the Simon boy? Yes, he's one of the exceptions in our school. He's an artist and all this other stuff. Said, do you know this boy Steve? And he goes, yes, I've met Steve. Has Steve been to your office? Yes, Steve has been in my office many times. Can you tell us why? No, I can't. Because he's a minor and that's protected. It's under the veil of juvenile, whatever. I don't remember the specifics. But the attorney asked a question that breached that veil of protection.
Mm-hmm.
And so and I remember what it was. I know it's in the books. I'd researched it, but whatever it was, the principal starts saying, well, we caught him burning his records in the school, and we caught him spray painting and attacking these kids out back. And the attorney stopped and said, whoa, that you can't be talking about that. He goes, well, yeah, I can, because you breached the protection. And the judge said, you did. So this is all fair game now.
Mm.
So he got him off the stand as quickly as he could because he had screwed up, and then brought up Steve's mom and was asking, did you tell Steve it was okay to attack the Simon boy? Because he had to show that she wasn't liable for it. No, of course I wouldn't. Is it okay for him to attack the Simon boy or the Simon family? No, of course I would never think something like that. He went through a few questions. Then he said, are you proud of your son? And her face fell, and she just started to cry. And I looked at my dad. I said, we just won this trial, didn't we? Because that's like saying, have you stopped beating your wife yet?
Yes, exactly.
But both answers, you're guilty. Are you proud of your son? No, I'm not proud. I can't control him. You're guilty. Yes, I am proud of him. That means it's okay.
You can go.
I think it's okay for him to attack the Simon boy. So she just started crying, and that was it. Trial was over. We won. Wow. And it was just one of those moments where we just saw it. It was literally like a courtroom drama. We knew it was over at that moment. And she left. Well, actually, she was taken back behind. I don't know what happened. I'm assuming she was taken back to the jail cell and processed. I never saw Steve again. The principal used that to kick Steve and Perry out of the school into a different school district. No one messed with me again after that, with one exception. In fact, on my website, I actually did a comic book of the last time I was attacked. Getting my life back together. People are talking to me again. I'm not afraid to look over my shoulder every day. And I'm going up the staircase with giant stairwells in this school. And I get hit from behind and get slammed up against the wall. And I look around, and this stairwell is empty instantly. And these two big thuggish kids I've never seen before spin me around and start just wailing on me. And my mind instantly goes right back to being out of control again. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going on. They're screaming and cursing and spitting and punch. And one of the guys said, "What are you going to do, Simon? What are you going to do? Pound, pound, pound. You can have our parents arrested, pound, pound, like you did to Stephen Perry." And that like clicked something off in my brain. And I grabbed one of the fists. I just stopped it. And I looked up at him and I smiled, and they both stopped and took a step back. I looked at him and I said, "You fuck with me? Yeah, I'll do it to you too." They stepped back a little bit more. I grabbed my books, walked off. No one ever messed with me again after that. So it was interesting that up and down within moments, but that was it, and it was over. Wow. But what's interesting is all of that led to what I do for my career directly. Mm-hmm. As I said, I was a straight A student. I was in all the honors classes. But during that, this was the fall semester, I failed advanced trig or calculus, whatever it was that I was in at the time. I couldn't think. And math, your mind has to be on.
Exactly.
And I was a mathlete. I was on the math team, but I failed the class. I couldn't do it, which gave me an extra period. I was also the school cartoonist and artist, so I just hung out in the art room. Mm-hmm. And the theater department needed someone to do designs for them and draw up brochures. And my art teacher knew that I was already designing professional marketing for people, starting with my dad's business. Mm-hmm. Said, "Well, I marked it." So I just went to the theater department, and I would sit on the end of the stage and sketch out ideas while they were putting together Fiddler on the Roof. And I fell in love with it. And as I was watching, I saw they weren't building things very well. So I started making suggestions and then started redesigning and rebuilding all the sets. And I got totally into it. I became backstage manager. I designed everything that the school did at that point. I brought in all the lumber from my job site, so I would help them build stuff. And my love of theater, which led into love of film and TV, started right then. I mean, I got a scholarship to college in theater, where I studied film and art and business. As soon as literally within a week or two of graduating college, I was living in Hollywood and started working. So it led directly, those assholes led me directly to a career I love.
Absolutely. Wow. Now, this movement that you started is mm-hmm. now seeming to spread across the country. Are you involved in any of these, with these minors? There was a case in Michigan. There was a case very recently with a minor involved. And what I saw growing up, and I'm older than you are, in the bully world was, hey, they're kids, the kids will be kids. But now when it crosses lines like that. So were you involved in, or helped at all in any of these other cases?
Yeah, not directly. I mean, my case set the precedent. For this, and every state has different variations of that law. I know in the Michigan case, my case was a precedent for their arresting the parents of the Michigan school shooter. Right. I was interviewed on MSNBC about it. Ari had me on, and I proved it could work. Is the biggest thing. Now, again, I was 16 at the time, and I just moved on with my life. So. Right. With one exception, I didn't really do anything else having to do with any of that. The exception is, well, let me back up. While I was being attacked, and once I warned them in court, there were 4 other kids I knew who had been severely attacked. One kid had his femur snapped by these guys, and other kids were attacked and beaten in other ways. And I went to each of them to ask them to show up in court for me. And I had the door slammed in my face every time. And they said, "No, we don't want anything to do with it. We had it bad enough. We don't want this to continue." After I won the court trial, I went back to each one. Even though they slammed the door in my face, I went back to each one and I showed them what they could do. I said,
Right.
I won. I'm going to show you how to do it too. This will protect you. It worked for me. And then I went to a number of local businesses where these guys had busted out windows, attacked clients, attacked their own people, whatever. I went to each business and I talked to the managers and owners, and I told them how they could also do it. And I don't know how many filed lawsuits. Again, I was 16. I didn't track any of that. I know
Right.
some did. I don't know how many. And I was deputized for my work on getting rid of the gang violence in our area in Houston.
Wow. I saw this. My family came from Italy and Sicily, and there was, not to pick on our ancestry, but there's all that fear and intimidation that becomes the big deal. And they're strong arming people because they know, look, I'll make an example of you. And that will scare everybody else away. And it takes someone to step up and say, no, I'm not going to. Unfortunately, that pioneer usually ends up taking the brunt of all the abuse like you did. But it's that courage to take that step. And I believe you may have changed the whole model here.
It's interesting. After my book came out, a lot of people at my high school didn't know the details. They knew something was going on, but they didn't really know what I had gone through until they read the book. And I got emails from a number of people who were also attacked and assaulted by these guys, and they sat in silence because they were afraid and never told anyone until my book came out. And then they opened up to me. And a couple of them told me that they can now rest easy because they realized what I had done, even though it was 40 years later. It gave them a catharsis.
Exactly.
That I was able to take care of the guys and get rid of them. And most people didn't know why. They were just gone. They didn't realize it was because of me.
Right. It's an incredible story. I can't even imagine being 16 years old and going through something like that. And what your family went through is beyond belief. Mark, how can people read? Well, I can see the book is behind Mark. You can see the book, ladies and gentlemen. Get this book. This is something you need to have. This is something you need to tell your children, your grandchildren, and anybody else along the line that this is not okay. It's not okay for these people to continue to do this, and there are ways that you can address this. But
and I think it's important to stand up. I've had friends who have moved their kids out of schools when they were being bullied, and I kept telling them it's a mistake. Don't do it, because then they've never learned to stand up for themselves, and they've just learned that running away is the answer, and that stays with you. This didn't stay with me because I dealt with it. I won. Okay, and I moved on with my life. Mm-hmm. That gave me a tremendous amount of confidence. Here I went through literally having my life threatened to I never thought about them again. Other than I thought it's a great story. It's why I wrote the book. It's a good story, especially when I put all the details together and I interviewed my parents about it and my best friend the one guy who didn't leave me, Jim. I interviewed them and I found, we kept all the court documents. The judge had told us to keep a diary that we could use in court. So I still have all the original diaries from then. So I went back to the original source on a lot of this stuff. I didn't have to remember a lot of it. And images and scans of the court documents and the diaries are in the book. I mean, it's, I didn't make anything up here.
Right, exactly.
But, I dealt with it. In fact, that's one of the things that I tell people. Well, there are two things. One, you have to stand up. But two, writing this book is I wrote it 20 years ago the first time, but I was a terrible writer. And so I didn't try to do anything with it. But the moment I finished writing the first draft, every other thought I had in my head went away about the book because it was down. I didn't have to think about it anymore. That was the most amazing catharsis, was just writing it down in excruciating detail. And, even though I'm a story artist, I work on stories on these big shows. You mentioned a few of them in movies. It took me a long time to get to the point where I felt that I could write this in a way to do it justice, to make it as exciting and thrilling and frightening as what I went through. And I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy now. So, 40 years after the events is when I finally released the book. Um, and I don't have, a lot of people said, how do you feel? It's like, it's just a great story as far as I'm concerned now. I don't have any negative repercussions from it.
And that's what's really critical, folks, is you address it, you deal with it, and you move on. I think what the terrorists, the bullies, etc., what they want to do is rent space in your head. And as long as you allow them to rent that space in their head, in your mind, in your head, they're winning. But when you don't care, someone told me one time the opposite of love is indifference. It's the same thing here. I don't care. You don't matter. You're not going to control me anymore.
Well, and it's one of those things where, dealing with things like that, it's a short-term, very difficult for a long-term benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Well, then you've got a long-term problem. But if you just stand up for a moment, and the thing is, I didn't fight them on their level.
Right.
I wasn't going to beat up 8 guys or 30 guys at a time.
Right.
That wasn't going to happen. But they couldn't compete on my level. I brought them into the court system. I learned what I needed to. I talked to the people I needed to, and, put them on a different level where they weren't going to win. So it's not always eye for an eye directly. I wanted to beat the crap out of them. I mean, it was, you get horrible, horrible thoughts. When I look back at my artwork, in fact, I even have this in the book too, where I show the art that I was doing before I was attacked. Then I showed some of the art I was drawing during that time when I'd lost my mind. And then I went back to just drawing nice things again. It got really dark and violent.
Right.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back and pulling up the artwork I was doing during the time, it's like, oh, wow, I probably should have been seeing someone at that point.
Exactly. And that will stay with you. Mark, this has been incredible. This is just incredible. How can people reach you?
Probably the best way is at my website, marksimonbooks.com. Samples of the book and comic books and animatics and stuff based on the story are on there. My email is the easiest way to find me, or I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do any other social networking. I just don't have time.
marksimonbooks.com. I will put that, ladies and gentlemen, when this goes public, I will put that link in there. Touch base with Mark. Get the book. Get this book. Wow. Well, we're just about out of time, Mark. This has been amazing. I want to thank you again for sharing this story of amazing courage, and show the world you can take on people who try to prey and terrorize others. You have resources that you can use. It's a story that's going to resonate with hundreds and hundreds of people. This is amazing. Now, you can see this TV show or this interview on ROKU TV or on my YouTube channel, which is called Frank Zaccari. And if you go on YouTube, please subscribe. Let me leave you with this, as I do every single week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Mark showed you where a great deal of those rocks are. Join us again next week for another life-altering event. Mark, thank you so much.
Frank, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.